Murder inquiry launched after body of 20-year-old woman is found in Ballina.
First, Gardaí have begun a murder investigation after the bodies of 2 women were discovered at a house in Grange Gorman in Dublin this morning. One of the women was in her 50s, the other in her 60s.
The woman's body was found behind a skip in a cul-de-sac off a quiet road called The Rise, which adjoins Griffith Avenue on the north side of the city. She had neck injuries and Gardaí believe she was strangled.
Gardaí have begun an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the death of a Dublin mother of 2 at her home over the weekend. The post-mortem shows she died from asphyxiation consistent with a blow. She's the 4th woman to die in violent or suspicious circumstances over the past 7 weeks.
He always worked, but he didn't hand up good money. So I had to struggle, like he gave me so much and everything was my problem. It was control, it was you do what I say. Your job is to look after the kids. It's none of your business what I do with my money. I give you so much a week. And that is the end of it as far as I'm concerned. The kids are your problem. I can do what I like.
All this mental torture, he chipped away. I had very little confidence at the time anyway. But what little confidence I had, he chipped away at that. Called names and told me people didn't want to talk to me. People had only talked to me because of him.
And before I knew where I was, I had become isolated from all my friends. And basically he became the centre of my universe because there was nothing else outside of him.
Suddenly I was only allowed out on a Sunday. And if I wanted to go out even with his sisters, there was hell. He called his own sisters whores. And if they wanted to take me out for the night with them, and if I wanted to do that, then I was a whore as well.
He was always telling me how fat I was, how are you ever going to get your figure back and look at the state of you, and in the name of Jesus, will you look at yourself, cop yourself on?
And 3 months into the pregnancy, everything changed. I wasn't allowed to go out, I wasn't allowed to have friends.
When we got married, he didn't like me to visit my family or for them to come and visit me. He used to say I was his property. And woman, you're subject to me. And when the children came along, that's what they grew up listening to.
The RUC in County Tyrone are questioning a man about the murder of a young Dungannon woman whose body was found in a stream in the town early today.
According to Gardaí, she had begun a late shift in the hospital at 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon, but did not return to her home in Walkinstown last night. Instead, she was found strangled in her car on Robin Hood Road, about a mile from her home, shortly before 11 p.m.
Gardaí say she was running from her attacker, who caught up with her as she arrived at a neighbour's house.
When he had kicked me to the ground, he'd actually picked me up like by the collar, by the front, and repeatedly banged my head off the wall. So I had bruising, like 4 or 5 lumps and bruising lumps on the back of the head. The ribs, he didn't actually break them, but I had bruised ribs.
And his answer was to start thumping me on the head. I can remember the spite coming from him as he was bashing my head. I remember the children were very, very upset.
So when I came home, he hit the roof, and there was a huge, big argument. And then in the scuffle anyway, I was pushed towards the window, and my hand went through the window, and that's how I have the scar.
And 2 o'clock in the morning then, I woke up to him. I woke up, his head started to beat me across the back. He had pulled the duvet off the bed and was beating me across the back.
And he was walking towards me, and he came up, and Hayley was in the buggy, and he punched me. Hayley jumped out of the buggy, ran, he grabbed me by the hair, I was screaming, he was dragging me around the place.
So then he started really hitting me. That was the first time. And I remember I fell down on the ground, on the floor, and he stamped on my stomach, and I started hemorrhaging.
I had a fear anyway that I was going to die, he was going to kill me.
He told me it was his right to stay in his home. He could behave any way he wanted in his home.
And I was terrified going anywhere, and especially if there was a crowd. I was terrified in a crowd, because I'd think in an open space I'd see him. But in the crowd, he's just going to jump out somewhere and kill me. So it was just a living nightmare. Everywhere you went, you're looking over your shoulder.
When she failed to return home, her parents raised the alarm. Early this morning, her body was discovered in a disused garden at Clare Street.
The bodies were found in separate rooms upstairs, one partially in the bed, in her own bedroom, the other lying in a pool of blood on the floor of her bedroom.
Gardaí say she had been killed by a blow or blows to the head.
Dr. Harbison has carried out a preliminary examination of the body at the scene.
And I think she feels if I'm happy, she's happy. Because she's only 8 now, and she says to me every day, "You all right, ma'am? You all right, ma'am?" I don't feel she should be saying that at that young of an age, asking me, "Am I all right?" Where, you know what I mean, she's too young, she should be out enjoying herself. But she probably feels if Dad comes in, he's probably going to start shouting. And when her dad comes in, the first thing she says to me when her dad comes in, "You all right, ma'am?"
He did things to the kids that I found bad. And they did them because they didn't want her out. I mean, he made them wash his feet, which I always found disgusting. And I know now that they did as well. But when I asked, I used to say, "Don't do it. Don't do it." But they did it. They got the basin of water, brought it into him, put his feet in it, and washed his feet. And again, it was, he wanted a bit of attention. And the only way he could get it was to bully them.
One night, when she was about 6 weeks old, I woke up about 2 in the morning and he was footless. And he had the baby over his wrist, by the baby grub, balancing on his wrist. He was a big man. And he held the baby over me. And he was talking to the baby, saying, "You know, look at your cunt of a mother, like, this is what you have for a mother. God help you," and all the rest of it. That night I decided that whether she was 6 weeks, 6 months or 6 years old, she'd never have respect if that was the way he was going on. So I decided he had to go.
The mother of 2 young children was separated from her husband and lived in Darndale all her life. Her son was among several children in the area to make his first communion yesterday. Gardaí say he witnessed his mother's death.
A post-mortem carried out by the state pathologist Dr. John Harbison in the early hours of this morning showed the Dublin mother of 2 died of asphyxiation and had suffered damage to the area around her throat, consistent with a blow.
A mother of 4 young children was reported missing from her home in Ballysaggart Park in Dungannon.
Your self-esteem has been eliminated, you've been isolated, your confidence is drained. How could you possibly be ready to leave? And my advice would be to someone in that situation, if you have the strength, if you have a good friend, if you know someone who you can trust, someone who works in the area, to go and speak to them. You only have to say a sentence and walk away, because what you've actually done is you've broken the silence. And that other person now knows that that is going on in your life, and the other person can give you support. And that's what's important. Even if it's one sentence, it could be another 2 years until you actually talk about it. But to make the first step, and always remember that there is support out there, that you're not the only one, and that this happens for a reason, and it is never your fault. And it is never your fault. And it is never your fault.